The transport ship descended through the golden clouds of Velcara Prime, and Queen Ceravel watched from her balcony with a mix of curiosity and disappointment. She had seen images of humans before, but those images had not prepared her for how small they looked, how fragile, how utterly ordinary compared to her own people. The Volanti stood 8 feet tall with skin that shimmered like liquid metal under sunlight, and their psionic abilities could crush stone or read thoughts across vast distances. Humans had none of this. They were short, soft, and possessed no mental powers whatsoever. Yet here she was, the most powerful ruler in 12 star systems, about to marry one of them. The alliance demanded it, her advisors had explained, and Ceravel understood politics well enough to know they were right. The Drektai Dominion was expanding, swallowing smaller civilizations with brutal efficiency, and the Volanthi Empire needed allies. Humans were new to the galactic stage, but they had proven surprisingly difficult to conquer, and several species had already learned to respect their strange persistency. Marriage between the Volanthi Queen and a human diplomat would cement the alliance and send a message to the Drekta. Ceravel accepted this logic, but she did not have to like it. Commander Marcus Cole stepped off the transport with a small bag over his shoulder and nothing else. He wore a simple gray uniform without medals or decorations, and his brown hair was cut short in a practical style. He was not ugly by human standards, Ceravel supposed, but he was certainly not impressive. He stood perhaps 5 feet and 10 inches tall, which meant the top of his head barely reached her shoulder when he looked up at the welcoming delegation. He smiled. It was a warm smile, genuine and unguarded, and Ceravel found it strangely disarming. "Queen Ceravel," he said, bowing in the Volanthi fashion with his palm pressed to his chest. "Thank you for receiving me, and I hope I can be worthy of the honor your people have shown mine." His accent was thick, but his pronunciation was careful, and Ceravel realized he had been practicing her language. That was unexpected. Most diplomats relied on translation devices. "You speak our tongue," she said. "Badly," Marcus admitted with a self-deprecating laugh, "but I am learning. And your language is beautiful, even when I butcher it." The court nobles behind Ceravel exchanged glances. They had expected arrogance from the human ambassador, or at least some attempt at posturing. This quiet humility confused them over the following weeks. Marcus continued to confound expectations. He attended every lesson on Volanthi customs without complaint, sitting for hours while instructors explained the proper way to bow, the correct phrases for formal occasions, the intricate rules of court etiquette. He made mistakes constantly, but he never grew frustrated or defensive. He simply apologized, asked questions, and tried again. He is very patient, one of the instructors reported to Ceravel, almost unnaturally so. "Is that a compliment or a concern?" Ceravel asked. The instructor hesitated before answering. "I am not certain, Your Majesty." The wedding ceremony was held in the Crystal Hall, a vast chamber where light refracted through 1,000 prisms and painted rainbows across every surface. Ceravel wore the traditional armor of a Volanthi queen, black metal etched with silver, a reminder that her ancestors had been warriors before they were rulers. Marcus wore a simple white suit that made him look even smaller beside her. The vows were spoken in both languages, and when Marcus said his lines in Volanthi, his voice was steady even though his pronunciation was still imperfect. Ceravel found herself oddly moved by the effort. After the ceremony, there was a feast with 700 guests from across the empire. Ceravel sat at the high table with Marcus beside her, and she watched him navigate the endless parade of nobles who came to offer their congratulations. Most of them were barely polite, some were openly dismissive. Lord Kethful, a distant cousin of the royal family and a notorious critic of the human alliance, approached the table with a sneer already forming on his face. "So this is the great human warrior we have heard so much about," Kethful said, his voice loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Tell me, human, what exactly do you bring to this marriage besides your species' desperation for protection? The hall grew quiet. Cyril felt her hands tighten on the arms of her chair. But before she could speak, Marcus responded, I bring very little. My lord, Marcus said calmly, I am not a warrior or a great leader, and I have no wealth or lands to offer, but I promise to serve the Queen and the Volanthi people with everything I have, which is mostly stubbornness and a willingness to learn. Kethvil blinked, clearly thrown off by the lack of defensiveness. You admit you are nothing? He pressed. I admit I am human, Marcus said with that same warm smile. We are small and weak and short-lived compared to your people, and we know this. So we try to make up for it by being useful in other ways. Kethvil snorted and walked away, muttering something about the Queen's pet, loud enough for everyone to hear. Laughter rippled through the hall, and Cyril felt a flush of anger on Marcus's behalf. But when she looked at her new husband, his expression had not changed. He simply picked up his glass and took a sip of wine as if nothing had happened. Later that night, Cyril found herself unable to sleep. She walked through the palace gardens, a habit she had developed as a child when her mind was too busy for rest. The moons of Velkar Prime hung low in the sky, casting silver light across the crystalline flowers that grew only in the royal grounds. She found Marcus sitting alone on a bench near the fountain. He was staring up at the stars with an expression she could not read, something between sadness and longing and a strange kind of peace. You should be resting, Cyril said. Marcus turned and rose quickly, bowing his head in greeting. I could say the same to you, Your Majesty. Cyril, she corrected him. We are married now, and you may use my name when we are alone. Cyril, he repeated, and the way he said it carefully, like he was handling something precious, made her feel warm in a way she had not expected. She sat beside him on the bench, and for a moment they simply looked at the stars together. Does it bother you? She asked finally, what Kethvil said tonight. Marcus was quiet for a long moment before answering. No, you are either very forgiving or very dishonest. He laughed softly at that, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise even him. I am not dishonest, he said, and I am not particularly forgiving either. But I have learned that some battles are not worth fighting, and Lord Kethvil's opinion of me is one of them. And if his opinion becomes the opinion of the entire court. Marcus turned to look at her, and in the moonlight his eyes seemed darker. Older somehow, then I will prove them wrong, he said simply. Not with words, but with time. Cyril studied his face, searching for arrogance or bravado, but she found only quiet certainty. You are a strange man, Marcus Cole. I have been told that before, he admitted. Usually by people who expected me to be someone I am not. He turned back to the stars, and Cyril followed his gaze. Somewhere out there, beyond the light of Velkar's suns, the Drektai were building their fleets and planning their conquests. War was coming. Everyone knew it, and when it arrived, this small, strange, humble human would be standing beside her. She was not sure if that thought comforted her or terrified her. Perhaps it was both. 3 months passed, and Marcus Cole became a familiar presence in the palace of Velkar Prime. He was not loud or demanding like other foreign dignitaries, and he did not seek attention or favor from the court nobles. Instead, he moved through the palace like a quiet shadow, always watching, always learning, always present, but never intrusive. Cyril found herself noticing him in unexpected places. She would pass through the kitchens and find him talking with the cooks, asking about Volanthi spices and food preparation with genuine interest. She would walk through the servant quarters and discover he had memorized the names of every maid and guard, asking after their families and remembering details from previous conversations. This behavior puzzled her among the Volanthi. Royalty did not mingle with servants, except to give orders. Marcus seemed to see no distinction between a palace cook and a high noble. He treated everyone with the same quiet respect. One morning, Cyril woke earlier than usual and looked out her window to see Marcus running through the palace grounds. This was not unusual, as she had learned that humans required regular physical exercise to maintain their health. What was unusual was that he had been running for nearly 2 hours already, and showed no signs of stopping. She watched him circle the gardens again and again, his pace steady and relentless, until finally her curiosity overwhelmed her, and she went down to meet him. "How long do you intend to continue?" she asked as he passed Marcus, slowed to a stop, barely breathing hard, despite the sweat soaking his simple clothing. "I usually run for 3 hours, he said. "Sometimes 4 if I have time." 3 hours? Cyril repeated, certain she had misunderstood. "Every day?" "Most days," Marcus said. "It helps me think, and it keeps me ready." "Ready for what?" Marcus smiled, that mysterious smile she was beginning to recognize. "Whatever comes." She walked with him as he cooled down, and he told her about something called a marathon, a human tradition where runners covered over 40 kilometers without stopping. He told her about ultramarathons, which were even longer, and about humans who ran across entire continents for reasons that seemed to make sense only to them. "Why?" Cyril asked, genuinely confused. "What is the purpose?" "There is no purpose," Marcus admitted. "We do it because it is hard. Because our bodies tell us to stop and we refuse. Because somewhere in our history, our ancestors survived by being the creatures that never stopped moving." Cyril did not know what to say to that. Later that week, there was an accident during preparations for the Festival of Lights. A massive ceremonial beam, carved from the sacred trees of the northern forests and weighing several hundred kilograms, slipped from its supports and fell toward a group of workers. Cyril was too far away to help, and her psionic abilities required concentration. She did not have time to gather, but Marcus was there. He moved faster than she would have thought possible, placing himself beneath the falling beam and catching it on his shoulders. The wood cracked against his body with a sound that made everyone nearby cry out in alarm. For a terrible moment, Cyril was certain he had been crushed. Then Marcus shifted his weight, lifted the beam higher, and held it steady while the workers scrambled to safety. When the beam was finally secured, Marcus stepped back and rolled his shoulders as if he had done nothing more strenuous than carry a piece of furniture. The workers stared at him with wide eyes. Cyril stared too. "Are you injured?" she demanded, rushing to his side. "Bruised," Marcus said. "Nothing serious. That beam weighs 300 kilograms. "I know," he said, and there was something almost embarrassed in his expression. "I should not have done that in front of everyone, but I could not let them be hurt." That evening, Cyril summoned the palace physician, a brilliant scientist named Dr. Velthara, who had spent decades studying alien physiology. "I want you to examine my husband," Cyril said. With his permission, of course, Marcus agreed without hesitation, and Dr. Velthara spent 3 days running tests with equipment that could analyze everything from bone density to neural pathways. When she finally presented her findings to Cyril, her expression was troubled. "Your Majesty," she began, "I do not know how to explain what I have discovered." "Try." Dr. Velthara spread her data across the holographic display. "Human bone density is significantly higher than ours, nearly 3 times as dense in some areas, and their muscle fibers are arranged in patterns that allow for sustained effort over extremely long periods." She highlighted another section of the display. "Their immune systems are remarkably aggressive, constantly adapting to new threats, and their bodies produce natural painkillers in quantities that would be toxic to most species." "What does this mean?" Cyril asked. "It means," Dr. Velthara said slowly, "that humans evolved on a world that was actively trying to kill them. And they survived anyway. She pulled up images of Earth, the human homeworld, and Cyril felt a chill run through her. The planet was covered in environments that would be lethal to Volanti. Frozen wastelands, burning deserts, oceans filled with predators, jungles crawling with poisonous creatures. Their gravity is higher than ours, Dr. Valthara continued. Their temperature variations are extreme. Their atmosphere contains elements that would damage our lungs over time, and nearly every other species on their planet developed natural weapons to hunt or defend against them. And they survived all of this? They did more than survive, Dr. Valthara said. They conquered it, and they did so without psionic abilities, without natural armor, without venom or claws or any of the advantages other species rely upon. She looked at Cyril with something that might have been fear. Your Majesty, humans are what we would call a persistence predator, and their ancestors hunted by chasing prey until the prey collapsed from exhaustion, sometimes running for days without stopping. Cyril thought of Marcus, running through the gardens every morning. She thought of him lifting that beam. Without hesitation, she thought of the calm way he absorbed insults and mockery without ever losing his temper that night. She found him in the library, reading a Volanti poetry collection with a translation device beside him. "May I ask you something?" she said. "Always. Why do you hide what you are?" Marcus looked up from his book, and for a moment his expression was unguarded. "I am not hiding anything," he said. "I am simply being myself. You are stronger than you appear, and you have more endurance than any being I have ever encountered. Yet you act as if you are ordinary." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "On Earth," he said finally, "we have a saying, speak softly and carry a big stick. And it means that true strength does not need to announce itself." He closed his book and stood to face her. "I have seen what happens when humans show off their capabilities," he said. "Other species become afraid, and fear leads to conflict, and conflict leads to death. So I have learned to be quiet about what I can do. You do not want others to fear you." "No," Marcus said. "I want others to know me, and I want them to see that I'm more than just what my body can do." He smiled. That same warm smile that had surprised her on the day they met. "I am not modest because I am weak, Cyril, and I am not humble because I have nothing to be proud of." "Then why?" "Because I know exactly what I am capable of," he said. "And that knowledge is a weight I carry every day." Before Cyril could ask what he meant, a messenger burst through the library doors with panic in her eyes. "Your Majesty," the messenger gasped. "Velmora colony has gone silent, and our scouts report Drektai warships in the system." The weight of Marcus's words suddenly made terrible sense. War had arrived. The fleet gathered above Velkara Prime in less than 2 days. 40 warships armed with the most advanced weapons the Volanti Empire could produce. Cyril stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Eternal Light, and studied the tactical displays showing the situation at Velmora colony. It was worse than she had feared. The Drektai had landed 3,000 soldiers and taken the entire civilian population hostage. Over 8,000 Volanti men, women, and children trapped in the colony's central complex. The enemy commander had wired explosives throughout the facility, linked to a dead man switch that would trigger if Volanti forces attacked. "If we assault the colony, they will kill everyone," Admiral Kethsara reported grimly. "And if we do nothing, they will fortify their position and use it as a staging ground for further invasions." "There must be another option," Cyril said. "There is," Marcus said quietly from beside her. Everyone on the bridge turned to look at him. He had been so silent during the briefing that most had forgotten he was there. A small team could infiltrate the colony and disable the kill switches before your fleet attacks, Marcus continued. "It would require moving through enemy-held territory without being detected, locating the explosive controls, and neutralizing them simultaneously across multiple locations. Admiral Kathsara shook her head. Impossible, as the Drektai have sensors throughout the complex, and any team large enough to cover multiple targets would be detected. Then send one person. Silence fell across the bridge. One person cannot disable multiple explosive systems at the same time, Kathsara said. One person can if they work fast enough, Marcus replied. And if they are willing to accept the risk. Cyril felt cold dread settling in her stomach. You are volunteering. I am. This is suicide, Kathsara said. Even if you could avoid detection, you would need to move through hundreds of enemy soldiers, locate the control systems, disable them, and escape before they realize what is happening. I understand. You will die. Marcus met the Admiral's eyes without flinching. Maybe. But those 8,000 people will not. The argument lasted for how Cyril forbade him from going. Then ordered him, then pleaded with him. Marcus listened to everything she said with patience and respect. And then he told her he was going anyway. You cannot command me in this, he said gently. I am not one of your soldiers. You are my husband. Yes, Marcus agreed. And as your husband, I am asking you to trust me. He left that night, slipping away in a maintenance pod, while Cyril was coordinating fleet movements with her admirals. By the time she discovered he was gone, he was already approaching the colony's outer atmosphere for 3 days. Cyril waited. She received scattered reports from surveillance drones and intercepted Drektai communications, and she pieced together a picture of what was happening on the surface that she could barely believe. Marcus moved through the colony like nothing the Drektai had ever encountered. He used maintenance tunnels and ventilation shafts that were too small for the enemy soldiers to follow. He traveled through areas of the colony that had been sealed off for safety reasons, crawling through toxic environments that would have killed a Volanthi in minutes. He did not sleep for 72 hours. Marcus Cole operated behind enemy lines without rest, surviving on emergency rations and stimulant injections that would have stopped a Volanthi heart. The Drektai knew someone was hunting them. Soldiers disappeared from their posts, found later with their necks broken or their throats cut. Supply caches were destroyed, communication relays disabled, patrol routes thrown into chaos. The enemy commander sent more and more troops to find the intruder. But Marcus was always one step ahead, using the colony's infrastructure against them, turning their own territory into a maze of traps and ambushes. On the second day, Cyril intercepted a transmission from the Drektai commander. What is it? The commander was demanding. What kind of creature are we dealing with? Unknown, came the response. But it does not stop, and we cannot find it. And every hour we lose more soldiers. It must sleep eventually. Commander, the subordinate said, and there was fear in his voice. I do not think it does. On the third day, Marcus found the hostages. They were being held in the colony's central arena, guarded by 200 Drektai soldiers with the explosive controls, spread across 6 locations around the facility. Disabling them all would require moving faster than any being should be able to move, crossing open ground under enemy fire, and somehow surviving long enough to reach each target. Marcus did it anyway. Cyril watched the assault from her bridge, coordinating the fleet attack as her ground forces surged toward the colony. The kill switches went dark one by one, each deactivation marked by a burst of confused Drektai communications. By the time the Volanthi soldiers breached the central complex, Marcus had already freed 200 hostages from a secondary holding area and was leading them toward the extraction point. The rescue teams found him at the rendezvous coordinates. Surrounded by the people he had saved, he was covered in blood, most of it green from Drektai soldiers, some of it red from wounds he had taken and ignored. He had been shot twice, once in the shoulder and once in the leg, And he was still standing when he saw Cyril approaching. He smiled, that same warm smile. "Tired now, but still genuine. Sorry I left without saying goodbye," he said. And then his legs gave out and he collapsed into her arms. Doctors said he should have died a dozen times over. The wounds alone would have killed a Volante. And the exhaustion and dehydration and chemical stress from the stimulants should have shut down his organs hours before the rescue, but Marcus's body simply refused to stop his immune system. Fought off infections that should have been fatal. His healing rate was 3 times faster than predicted. And even unconscious, his vital signs remained stubbornly stable. He is remarkable, Dr. Velthara said as Cyril sat beside his bed in the medical bay. "I have never seen anything like it. He is human," Cyril said quietly. "Yes," the doctor agreed. "And I am beginning to understand what that means." Marcus woke 2 days later, and his first words were to ask about the hostages when Cyril told him everyone had survived. He closed his eyes and let out a breath of relief that seemed to carry the weight of 3 days of terror. "Good," he whispered. "That is good. The fleet is calling you a hero," Cyril said. "I am not a hero. You saved 8,000 lives." "I did what needed to be done," Marcus said. "That is not heroism. That is just being useful." Cyril took his hand, careful not to disturb the bandages covering his injuries. "The Drektai are calling you a monster." "I know. Does that bother you?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "I would rather be a monster to my enemies than let innocent people die." A message arrived that evening from the Drektai War Master himself, transmitted directly to the Eternal Light on a priority channel. Cyril read it 3 times before she could believe what it said. "Return the human to us, and we will withdraw from this sector. But if you keep him, we will burn your worlds until we find him." At the bottom of the message was a single question. "What is he?" Cyril looked at Marcus, sleeping peacefully in the medical bay, and she realized she did not have an answer. She was only beginning to understand what humans truly were. And the revelation terrified her almost as much as it filled her with hope. The footage from Velmora spread across the Empire like fire through dry grass security recordings. Surveillance drone captures and testimony from rescued hostages painted a picture of something that seemed impossible: a single human moving through enemy territory for 3 days without sleep, taking wounds that should have killed him and continuing anyway, fighting with a combination of precision and brutality that left hardened Volante soldiers speechless. Marcus Cole became famous overnight. Nobles who had once dismissed him as the Queen's pet now spoke his name with reverence. And common citizens created songs and stories about the human who had saved 8,000 lives. Alliance requests from other species flooded the Volante diplomatic channels, all of them suddenly eager to establish ties with humanity Marcus hated. Every moment of it, Cyril watched him struggle with the attention in ways she had not expected. When nobles bowed to him in the corridors, he looked uncomfortable. When soldiers saluted him, he seemed almost pained. He retreated into his old routines with desperate intensity, running every morning, talking with servants, spending quiet evenings in the library, but people would not leave him alone. "You could use this," Cyril said one evening as they walked through the palace gardens. "You have more influence now than any human in history, and you could shape the Alliance, advise our military, even command troops if you wished." "I do not want to command." "Troops? Why not?" Marcus stopped walking and looked up at the stars. "Do you know how many Drektai I killed at Velmora?" Cyril shook her head. 47. Marcus said quietly, "I counted every one. They were enemy soldiers. They were people." Marcus said, "They had families and friends and lives, and I ended all of that because they were standing between me and the hostages." He turned to face her. "I am not proud of what I did, and I do not want to be celebrated for it." Cyril did not understand. Among the Volante, warriors were honored for their victories. And killing enemies was a mark of strength and skill. But looking at Marcus's face, she could see that he carried those 47 deaths like stones around his neck. "Tell me about your world," she said. Marcus was silent for a long moment. Then he began to speak. He told her about Earth's history, about the wars that had killed millions, about weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds, about genocides and conquests and empires built on the suffering of others. He told her about soldiers who came home from battlefields unable to sleep, haunted by the things they had seen and done. He told her about his own grandfather, who had fought in something called the Second World War and never spoke about it except in nightmares. "Humans are very good at killing," Marcus said. "We have spent our entire history perfecting the art of destroying each other. And we have gotten so good at it that we finally had to stop." "What do you mean?" "We developed weapons that could end our entire species," Marcus explained. "And we came very close to using them. And that experience changed us." He looked at his hands as if seeing something Cyril could not. "We learned that our greatest enemy was ourselves, and that the capacity for violence we carry inside us must be controlled, always, every moment of every day." "Is that why you are so quiet?" Cyril asked. "Is that why you never boast or threaten or show what you can do?" "Yes, you are not modest because you are weak." "No," Marcus said. "I am modest because I know exactly what I am capable of. And I have seen what happens when humans stop holding back." He met her eyes. "Every human carries a monster inside them, and we spend our lives building cages to keep it contained. And most of the time we succeed. And when you do not?" Marcus's expression darkened. "Then worlds burn." Cyril thought about the Drektai commander's message. The fear in those words. The desperate question. What is he? Now she understood humans were not weak. They were weapons. Every single one of them. Weapons that had learned to disguise themselves as ordinary beings. The gentleness, the humility, the quiet patience. All of it was a choice. A conscious decision made every day to be kind when they could be terrible. "You are afraid of yourself," she said softly. "All humans are," Marcus admitted. "It is the first lesson we learn as children, that we must control ourselves because no one else can control us." He reached out and took her hand. "I did not want you to see what I really am, and I did not want you to be afraid of me. I am not afraid of you. You should be." Cyril shook her head. "No, because I have seen you talk with servants like they were your equals, and I have seen you learn our customs with patience and respect. And I have seen you risk your life for people you did not know." She stepped closer to him. "The monster you carry does not define you, Marcus, and the cage you built around it does." For the first time since she had met him, Cyril saw tears in Marcus's eyes. "You do not understand," he whispered. "No one ever understands." "Then help me." He pulled her into an embrace, and she felt his body trembling against hers. "I love you," she said, the words surprising her even as she spoke them. "Not the hero from Velmora, not the symbol of the Alliance. Just you." Marcus held her tighter. "I do not deserve that. That is not your decision to make." They stood together in the garden for a long time, and when Marcus finally pulled back, something had changed in his expression. The walls he had built around himself were still there, but she could see through them now. She could see the man beneath, the one who carried 47 deaths and countless more from his ancestors' history, the one who woke every morning and chose to be gentle despite everything inside him that whispered otherwise. "The Drektai will come again," Marcus said. "I know. They will come with everything they have, and they will try to destroy your empire. I know. When that happens," Marcus said slowly, "I will not be able to hold back, and you will see things that might change how you feel about me." Cyril cupped his face in her hands. "Nothing will change how I feel about you." She kissed him then, and he kissed her back. And for a moment, the coming war and the weight of history and the monster he carried inside him all faded away. But only for a moment. The next morning, reports arrived from the border sectors. The Drektai Dominion was massing its entire fleet. 300 warships gathering at the edge of Volanti space. Their target was Volcara Prime itself. The War Master's message had not been a negotiation. It had been a declaration of war. The Drektai Armada emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of metal locusts. 300 warships spreading across the sky above Volcara Prime Ciravel stood on the bridge of the Eternal Light. Her psionic abilities stretched to their limits. As she coordinated with commanders across her fleet, they were outnumbered nearly 4 to 1. The battle began badly. Drektai ships were heavier and more numerous, and they pressed forward with the brutal efficiency that had conquered a dozen civilizations. Valant cruisers fell one by one, their shields overwhelmed by concentrated fire, and Ciravel felt each loss like a wound in her mind. Marcus stood beside her, calm and focused, watching the tactical displays with an expression she had never seen before. This was not the gentleman who talked with servants and read poetry in the library. This was something else entirely. The human fleet is 15 minutes out. Admiral Kefsara reported, 50 ships. But I do not see how they can change the outcome. They will, Marcus said quietly. The human fleet arrived in a formation that made no tactical sense to Volanti eyes. Their ships were smaller than either the Drektai or Volanti vessels, and they spread out in loose clusters that seemed to invite attack. Then they began to fight. Ciravel had studied human military history, but nothing had prepared her for seeing it in person. Human ships moved with reckless aggression, diving into enemy formations and firing at point-blank range. They took damage that would have forced Volanti captains to retreat and kept fighting. They sacrificed escorts to protect carriers, then used those carriers to launch swarms of fighters that tore through Drektai formations like needles through cloth. More than that, they adapted. Every time the Drektai adjusted their tactics, the humans changed theirs. Every trap the enemy set was anticipated and turned against them. It was as if the human admirals could see into the future, predicting enemy movements before they happened. How are they doing this? Kefsara breathed. We have been fighting each other for 10,000 years, Marcus said. We have had a lot of practice. The tide of battle shifted. Drektai ships began to fall, caught between Volanti precision and human ferocity. But the War Master was no fool, and he saw that space superiority was slipping away. Ground forces inbound. An officer reported, they are targeting the palace directly. Ciravel felt ice in her veins. They mean to capture me. They mean to end this war in one stroke. Marcus corrected. If they take you, the Empire will surrender to save you. Then I must flee. No, Marcus said. You must stay and coordinate the fleet, because without you, the psionic link will break and our ships will lose their advantage. I cannot fight off a ground invasion alone. Marcus looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the monster he had spoken of, the thing that every human carried inside them. You will not be alone. The Drektai landing craft touched down in the palace gardens, and 300 elite soldiers poured out with weapons raised. They were the War Master's personal guard, veterans of 100 conquests, and they moved through the palace with practiced efficiency. Palace guards fell before them, outmatched in numbers and firepower. Nobles fled to safe rooms that offered only the illusion of protection, and then they encountered Marcus Cole. He met them in the throne room. Standing alone before the ancient seat of Volanti power, the Drektai commander laughed when he saw him. One human? He said, the War Master will be disappointed. As I expected, at least a challenge. Marcus did not respond. He simply moved. What happened next would be remembered in Volanti history for 1,000 years. Marcus fought like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. A blur of motion that seemed to exist in multiple places at once. He was faster than the Drektai could track, stronger than their armor could withstand, and more relentless than anything they had ever encountered. He did not fight like a Volanti warrior. With elegant forms and psionic enhancement, he fought like a human, with every dirty trick and desperate technique his species had developed over millennia of killing each other. He used the environment as a weapon, toppling pillars onto enemy soldiers. And using debris as improvised shields, he turned enemy weapons against their wielders. He exploited every weakness, every blind spot, every moment of hesitation, and he did not stop. The Drektai had fought many species across many worlds, but they had never faced anything like this. Their soldiers fell one after another, unable to match his speed or predict his movements. Those who tried to flee found him already blocking their path. Those who stood their ground were broken. Cyril watched through the palace security systems when she could spare attention from the fleet battle, and what she saw filled her with awe and terror. This was what Marcus had been hiding. This was the truth of humanity. The capacity for violence that they spent their lives containing. Marcus was not merely skilled or trained. He was a weapon that had been taught to pretend it was a person. And now the pretense had fallen away. The battle lasted less than an hour. When it was over, Marcus stood alone in the throne room, surrounded by fallen enemies. He was wounded in a dozen places, blood running from cuts and burns across his body. But he was still standing, still fighting, still refusing to fall. The War Master himself came through the main doors, flanked by his last bodyguards. He was enormous, even by Drektai standards, covered in ceremonial armor that had never known defeat. "So you are the human," the War Master said, "the one my soldiers whisper about in fear." Marcus said nothing. "I will enjoy killing you," the War Master continued, "and then I will take your mate and make her watch as I burn her world." Marcus raised his head, and his eyes were cold. "You will not touch her," the War Master charged. The fight was brief. Marcus was tired and wounded, but the War Master had never faced a human in single combat. He did not understand what he was dealing with. He did not know that humans had been fighting beings larger and stronger than themselves since the dawn of their species, and that they had always found ways to win. Marcus moved inside the War Master's guard, avoiding his massive arms and striking at weak points in his armor. He used the War Master's size against him, staying close where the larger being could not bring his strength to bear, and when the opportunity came, he struck. The War Master fell to his knees, his throat torn open by a strike that should not have been possible. Marcus stood over him, breathing hard, blood dripping from his hands. "Tell your people," Marcus said quietly, "that the humans are done being modest." The War Master died without another word. The Drektai fleet retreated 3 hours later, their command structure shattered and their morale broken. The Battle of Velkar Prime was over, and the Human-Volanti Alliance had won. Cyril found Marcus in the throne room after the fighting ended, sitting on the steps before her throne with his head in his hands. The bodies had been cleared away, but the evidence of the battle remained in scorched walls and broken pillars. She sat beside him without speaking. "I told you that you would see things that might change how you feel," Marcus said without looking up. "You did, and?" Cyril took his hand, the same hand that had killed more than 100 enemies in a single hour. "I see a man who fights so that others do not have to," she said. "I see someone who carries a terrible burden and chooses to use it only when there is no other option." She lifted his chin so he would meet her eyes. "I see my husband?" Marcus searched her face for fear or disgust, and found only love. "I killed so many," he whispered, "to protect so many more. Is that enough?" "I do not know," Cyril admitted, "but I know that you asked the question, and that matters more than you understand." The war ended in the months that followed, as the Drektai Dominion sued for peace rather than face the combined might of humans, and Volanta Marcus returned to his quiet routines, running every morning, talking with servants, reading poetry in the library. The galaxy knew what he was now. They had seen the footage from the throne room, heard the stories from survivors, watched a single human defeat an army. But when he was with Cyril, it was just Marcus Gentlekind, Humble, she understood now that this was not weakness. This was the greatest strength of all, the power to be terrible, choosing every day to be gentle instead. One evening, as they walked through the gardens where they had first spoken honestly to each other, Cyril asked a question that had been forming in her mind for months. Do all humans carry what you carry? Marcus considered the question carefully. Yes, he said finally, every single one of us. And we spend our whole lives learning to hold it back. That must be exhausting. It is. Marcus agreed. But it is also what makes us human. He stopped walking and turned to face her. We are not strong because of what we can do, he said. We are strong because of what we choose not to do. Cyril pulled him into an embrace. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For choosing me, she said. For choosing kindness. For choosing to be more than what you were built to be. Marcus held her close. Thank you for seeing me, he said. The real me, not just the monster or the hero. They stood together in the garden as the moons rose over Volcara Prime. And somewhere in the distance, the sounds of celebration echoed through the capital. The war was over. The alliance was secure, and the queen of the Volanthi Empire had found something she had never expected. A partner who understood that true strength was not about power, but about the wisdom to use it only when necessary, and the restraint to be gentle the rest of the time.